Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Binz and here we are in what is my 6th video on this addictive indie game called Shapes.io. For those of you who don't know it, Shapes.io is a factory-style building game where the idea is to extract sources on an infinite map and then manipulate these sources somehow to produce some sort of shape, which you feed into the center of the map, aka the hub, which is what we're looking at right now. And somehow, for some reason, all of this is a lot more exciting and addictive than it sounds, okay? Now, all of my videos so far have dealt with the final portion of the game, where you've already completed all 26 predetermined challenges or levels and have entered free play mode. And this video is no different, so if you're new to this game, then I might suggest you look at some other people's tutorials first, some Let's Plays or something. There are a lot of those types of videos out there, so that you would know what this game is about, how it works, etc. And then I cordially invite you to come back and check out this video. Now, in the first 3 videos I've done on this game, in case you haven't seen them, I went in pursuit of the fastest automated factory, also called Make Anything Machine, or MAM for short. The 4th video was a tutorial video based on a user request I'd gotten, which also dealt with MAMs, by the way. And then in video number 5, I tried to make an MAM in as few buildings and pieces as possible. I managed to create one in little under 2,000 units in total, so I invite you to go watch that video if you're interested to find out how I pulled that off. So, what's on today's menu, you ask? Well, inspired by that previous video, I cooked up a new challenge. This time, the constraint was not on the total amount of buildings in my MAM, but on 4 building types in particular. More specifically, I wanted to find out whether I could create a Make Anything machine that had only one stacker, only one of these units, then only one painter, and I gave myself the liberty of choosing a painter, and I chose the dual painter. It was also allowed to have only one cutter, shape cutter, and I used the quad cutter or 4-ways cutter. And also it was allowed to have only one of these, one color mixer. So not one module of each, but one item, just the one of each of these 4 units for the entire Make Anything machine. Could it be done? That was the challenge. And the answer is, well, obviously, since I made a video about it, the answer is obviously yes, I pulled it off. Now, hold on to your seats because this one is a doozy. At least that's my opinion. You may feel free to disagree, obviously, if you want to. Right? I call this machine because of the challenge that I could only use one of these items in the entire machine. I called this machine 1. And this is what it looks like. Look at this thing. I am really proud of it. I love the way it looks. I love the way it functions. And I hope you'll agree once you're finished watching this video and I'm finished explaining how it works. Now, in advance, I apologize if I don't really manage to explain everything in detail, because this machine has a lot of logic built in, and it's actually pretty complex, and a lot of this machine was trial and error based. I'm not gonna lie about that. So, put in something, see if it works. If it works, leave it alone. Then if I bump into a next problem, tamper with it some more. So, you also see this reflected in the wiring layer. This is the wiring layer. It's at least equally convoluted and elaborate, all right? So the thing is that some of you watching this, if you are advanced players, you might actually look at this and go, well, you have overcomplicated some of these things way too hard. You could have done it more simply as well. And that's totally possible. As I said, this is a trial and error machine, most of all. So it works now. I am happy with the way it works, and let's dive into how it works, right? So the first issue I had was with the color. How would I be able to supply all the color that I needed if I was only able to use one color mixer? No more than one, just the one. So what I did was I created a storage array that has a lot of different colors. And here is the one and only color mixer that I have in this machine. Oh, and by the way, if you hear the thunder rolling in the background, we have a bit of a thunderstorm going on at the moment. I don't know if you can tell, if you will hear that through the microphone, but if you do, then that is what that is, you know. Okay, so back to the machine. First, I was contemplating mechanisms whereby if you needed primary colors, you know, red, green, and blue, then there would be some kind of bypass mechanism in place that would bypass the color mixer. But in the end, I thought to myself, you know what, if you feed for example, let's say red on both sides through the color mixer, then it will actually be processed and the output will also be red. So I felt like that was easier than some kind of bypass mechanism that would detect whether the colors requested were, red, green, or blue, and then move past the color mixer. So that's basically what I did. In specific intervals, this machine is going to release let's call it a batch of pairs of colors. So for example, if we request, if a red color is requested, then these filters will open up. And if a yellow color is requested, then these filters will open up. And if a green color is requested, then these storages will open up. And actually, let's get this machine rolling. I have to manipulate this for a bit to get the machine rolling, because it has some other safety mechanisms where we will get back to. That's why it's not doing anything at the moment. Right. I'm gonna take out these lines, and now my machine should get producing red color. Is it doing that? It's doing gray first, and then it will do red. All right. So the nifty thing about this color mixing unit is that it will rotate, right? And it will rotate. It will alternate the requested colors, and the alternation. Maybe I will put this on screen to keep it in mind. The alternation of this rotational mechanism is red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, white, and gray. And after that, it will cycle and it will go back to red, right? So what it does is it produces a bunch of red color, red shapes, and they are fed into the into the cutter, right? And the cutter will cut them all up. I'm using an omni shape. That's a shape that has all of the 4 different shape forms in one. So I cut that up, and that way we are getting, each possible quadrant in each possible color, right? And since this is now rotating, First we had red, then we got some yellow. It should have been a bigger batch, but I think because I just started up this machine, it was a small batch or something, whatever. Then we get green. Now we should be getting cyan. Exactly. Then we should be getting blue. Next, we should be getting purple. And then white. Now for white, something peculiar happens because I only get the one color mixer, right? And you need 2 color mixers to produce white. Any Shapes.io player will know this, right? So I needed to figure out a way to handle that. And the way I handled it is as follows. If I need white, if I need to produce white shapes, then I'm using these 2 storages. And what will happen is a batch of this blue and a batch of this yellow is released, and simultaneously a batch of these 2 storages is released. And what they will do is, first the white will be produced, and then the yellow that is taken from this storage will automatically be replenished. And the way that happens is as follows. First, these batches will come down, they will move back up again, and we're about to see this happen now. And they will block the path for the red and the green dye that is going to replenish my yellow storage. We should see this happen now. There we go. That's blue and yellow. And then red and green, they queue. And as soon as all of the blue and yellow in the queue is processed, then the green and the red will connect. And it will automatically refill this storage to max capacity. And then a batch of this should be released so that we can get gray shapes as well. There we go. Now we get gray. And then we get back to red. These shapes, these dyes, these paint units are blocked. They are connected to this belt reader right here. So as long as this belt reader has stuff moving across it, then this will be blocked, and the red will patiently wait until the cutter is ready to, to accept new shapes, and then the red will be processed and the cycle will start all over. Now, as you can see, I also went a bit silly. This logo shape right here, it changes color according to the color of the shapes that moves across the belt. There we go. Now it's red. So I went a little crazy with this machine, I'm not gonna lie. So how does this rotational mechanism work? Because, truth be told, it is pretty complex, and the complexity of it all is found in the wiring layer. Now, again, I'm going to try to explain this as clearly and as transparently as possible. But essentially what it does is this signal, this is the main signal, right? And remember the sequence I talked about, the sequence of being red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, white? Well, the thing is, if the signal is white, yeah, let's mimic this by putting a constant signal here. So if the signal is white, then the storages of the red paint will open. Right? So the storages are actually not connected to the signal of their own color, but they are connected to the signal of the previous color. There we go. So this signal is white, and I'm not sure why we're not... Yeah, I have to probably put that constant signal right here, don't I? Yeah. Alright. Anyway, So the signal connected to the red storages is actually white, and this cycles, right? This is a cycling system. So if we get a red signal, we open the yellow storage. If we get a yellow signal, we open the green storage. If we open the green signal, we open the cyan storage, etc. And that's how I kick off this rotational mechanism. Now this gets a lot more complex because first of all, this signal feeds upwards into this array. But let's not look at that yet. Right? Let's keep it as simple and transparent as I can keep it for now. So now that we get the red signal, the next color that we should be producing is yellow. Right? And then the next will be green, etc., etc., etc. And then that, if you have looked at the numbering, this numbering right here, it kind of explains how the machine works. So this feeds into what I call the warehouse. And we're now gonna have a look at the warehouse. I'm also going to put these wires back. And what these wires do, actually, alongside with this entire mechanism, is determine whether our storages, the storages that we have in the warehouse, the ones that we're going to look at right now, if one of them is full, then this machine will actually stop producing that particular color. So a lot of this machine is trying to make this work as efficiently as possible. Okay, so let's look at the warehouse first. This is the warehouse, and it is it's pretty much a behemoth of a factory in and of itself already, right? But what the warehouse does is, you will know that with 4 shapes and 8 colors, uncolored or gray being one of them, you have a potential total of 32 quadrants, right? Now, a shape can consist of 16 quadrants. So what I did is, this is the line that's feeding from the color mixer and the cutter. So it's exporting quadrants. And then I have a filter mechanism right here that is basically like a sort of a sorting machine, right? It's going to feed these lines. It's going to feed one of 32 lines, one for each potential quadrant in each of the potential colors. And then it's going to kind of cross-reference that with the 16 quadrants that the final shape might request, right? So we kind of get this table structure where, for example, if this wire right here, the let's call it the first quadrant, it requests, let's say, a red circle, right? Then the corresponding, you can kind of look at this like an Excel table or something, or like any cross-reference table. Then we'll open up that specific filter, right? And we're going to see in a moment how it works. Right, so the filter is right here. And the thing is, because all of my shapes are currently full, my machine is not doing anything. But if I take out, for example, a batch of red circle quadrants, then my machine should start producing red colors again. Right? There it goes. And as soon as the batch is, as soon as the storage is full again in the warehouse, it will stop producing altogether. So the next thing it does is, once this warehouse is set up, then as soon as we get a shape signal, right now I don't have a shape signal, that's why the machine is idle. But as soon as we get a shape signal, it's going to, as I said before, for every one of 16 columns, it's going to detect which quadrant is requested, then it's going to open up that specific filter. So again, if for example this line right here requires a white windmill quadrant, then this is the only filter that will open up, and the rest in this column will remain shut. And the way that works is just simply cross-referencing these wires, and then putting a comparer. I don't know what the official term is for this unit, but a compare unit, and then it will open up that filter. All right. So once that has happened, all of these shapes will be released, and they will feed into the next unit. And the next unit is what I call the lateral pair unit. It is located right here. So what it is going to do is it is going to feed those into another storage unit. And this time around, I am not sure yet if I should let the shapes run already, because the thing is, so much stuff will be happening at once that it might get too convoluted and less transparent. So let's keep it without the shapes for now. I will try to explain it, how it works in theory first, right? So imagine that we need that we get two shapes coming down these lines, right? They will feed into these storages, and they will initially be blocked by these filters. So what will happen is this machine is going to, this belt is going to be jammed, and we're going to be creating a feedback loop right here because of how the priority output of storages works. First, the shapes will go here, and if not, they will just loop over and over and over and over and over again. And only if both of these belts readers notice that we have a loop going on, only then will both filters be released. Otherwise, one of these machines is going to wait patiently until the other one has enough shapes before it will release these shapes and move it into the next section, right? And this will happen for every pair. Now you might be wondering why I have this kind of snake pattern going on, right? Here the snake is the longest, and then this snaky thing gets shorter and shorter, shorter and shorter. And I did that in order to ensure that whenever we have, whenever all of these shapes are released, they do not hit their respective storage containers at once, right? So they are not all triggered and released at once. And that is a way to avoid that the machine gets completely jammed and stuck. And it's a mechanism to try and keep these shapes separated, these pairs of shapes that need to get stacked, because the stacker is the next step. I tried to keep these batches as separated as possible, and as a matter of fact, that was one of the biggest challenges in this machine, because if you use a stacker, then obviously you need your inputs on both sides of the stacker to be whatever the stacked shape is going to have to be. So, and if working with this machine, I found that one of the biggest challenges is that these shapes get mingled, and on the left side and on the right side of the stacker, you get pairs of shapes that are not supposed to be stacked with each other, but with other pairs of shapes. So again, one of the biggest challenges of this machine was keeping the batches separated at all costs so that they don't get mixed, right? So this runs down. Let's not look at this for now, but it runs down, and eventually these pairs of shapes will then run into the one and only stacker unit that I have on the map. Here it is, right? This is the only stacker unit that I have. So, because this is the only stacker unit, I need to make sure that whereas usually you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have 15 modules of these stacker units, so that's usually 15 times 8. That's the amount of units you have, but I have only the one. So I needed to come up with a very nifty and well-functioning feedback mechanism that would output that would loop the output of whatever comes out of the stacker back into the stacker without jamming itself. Right? That was the big challenge. So I worked with block sections. And in case you don't know what a block section is, it's a safety mechanism that is used, for example, in railroads. And I believe that roller coaster constructors, for example, also work with this mechanism. So what is a block section? A block section is basically that you're going to divide your track into sections, and one of these sections can never contain more than one vehicle on it. So this is a mechanism where as long as there is one vehicle present in one section, then the queuing vehicle or the vehicle that comes after will have to queue until the section is vacated, and then it will be allowed to pass. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let a shape run. There we go. The shape I have connected to the signal is this one, right? So this will be the shape that will start to produce. Okay, and now we're going to see how this block section thing works. So through an elaborate convoluted wiring setup, right? I'm not even going to go into detail about this, right? Because it's just too complex. It's so complex that I won't even be able to explain it, to be brutally honest with you. But what it basically does, as you can see happening right now, is that as soon as a set of storages still contains shapes, then the other shapes will have to wait. I think I can force this, right? Let's force this so that we can see this happening. Right, so as long as there are shapes in this particular storage, these storages won't release their batches. Right, that's the idea. That's how it works. And I have the same thing going on here. We will get back to that. But I really need to use a lot of this block section strategy. Right, so now all of these shapes just patiently wait. And this block section thing also applies to these filters right here. So for example, right now you see that we have these shapes waiting, and I explained before that the condition was that we have rotating loops of both shapes in order to release them both downward. But this block section thing is also blocking that. So all of these shapes, they are patiently waiting their turn until the block sections, until the storages, in this case, get vacated. And only then will they release their content. And this moves up all the way, because as long as that is the case, this warehouse cross-section release mechanism right here, that will also be blocked, right? It will be shut off and no shapes will be moving as long as we have shapes stuck in block sections, right? So let's put my units back and see this work for a bit. So I needed a way to ensure in as many cases as possible that the proper shapes would stay in place. And one of the biggest challenges with this game is that it is near to impossible to synchronize two belts, right? It is almost impossible that to force, for example, that if you have 10 shapes, a batch of 10 shapes running across one belt, then it's near to impossible to get this machine or to get this game to release exactly 10 shapes on the other belt as well, right? So because of this, I needed a sort of trimming mechanism. And that is what these two storages do. So these two storages are going to ensure that whenever we have an indiscrepancy between this belt and this belt, right, you just saw it happen, then the excess is going to overflow and it's going to continue into the next section, which we are going to have a look at in a moment. But this is kind of a trimming unit, let's say, so that these belts will stay synchronized and not, desynchronize excessively, because otherwise you are going to run the risk that one of these shapes is going to get stuck in this machine, and the desynchronization will increase over time, right? So that's what the trimmer does. Now, the next section is very confusing, I think, if you look at it just like this. So I might cut the signal again, and let's get back to this. So essentially what I have going on right here is the same thing with the feedback loop. Excuse me about that. Same thing with the feedback loop in pairs. That is going to release the different pairs of shapes. The only difference is that now these storages are going to contain shapes that are already stacked, right? So I have these storages, 8 in total, are going to contain pairs. They're going to contain halves, so left halves and right halves, and then in the next section, these 4 are going to contain full layers. No, these ones will. Now I'm confusing myself. No, these ones will. They will contain full layers. These ones will contain shapes with 2 layers each, and every one of them, we don't need you, every one of them through this block section mechanism is going to feed back down, feed back to the left, more block sections right here, more block sections right here. It's going to continue back upwards, and ultimately it will feed back into the one and only stacker that I have on this map. And then this filter, eventually, if we get the correct shape, then it will allow that shape to pass, and then it will go here, and eventually that will move into a buffering system that I have going on at the hub. And otherwise, all of the other shapes are just going to move forward and move into this system. Now, the filtering mechanism that I did prior to these storages is radically different from what I had. So how does it work? We actually start at the end of the line, and I have 4 filters here, and they are connected to a wire that tells them which shape this particular filter or this particular storage unit needs, right? So what happens is all of these shapes that come from the stacker, they will come out here, and they will firstly move into this filter, right? This filter is going to detect, do we need this particular shape, yes or no? Otherwise, it's going to output that to the secondary filter. And the secondary filter is going to do the same. It's going to allow the shape to pass if it is this particular shape of this particular storage, the one that we need to get stacked in that particular lane. And otherwise, it's going to feed that, it's going to output that, and it's going to feed that into the next system, which does exactly the same thing. Now, again, this time we have 4 filters, and it's going to check 4 filters, and if not, it's going to move it on to this 8 filter mechanism. Now, what does this do? This is kind of, let's call it a whirlpool, right? Because if all of these shapes moving through, if they match, they will actually collect again, and they will move on to an equal distribution system. So that means that all of these shapes, the ones that get, let's say, accepted into the whirlpool, they will all collect here on the left-hand side, and the distribution will be 1 to 8 equally. And that means that you have a 1 in 8 chance that the correct shape will be distributed to the correct filter. Now, why did I do that? The reason for that is if we have filters that happen to request the same shape, then if I didn't have a kind of whirlpool distribution mechanism in place, then one filter would get all the priority and the other ones wouldn't. And that's why I did that. So what happens is that all the shapes that get, let's say, approved by these preliminary filters, they will get stuck in the whirlpool and they won't leave, right? So if let's say the shape that moves into the filter is not the correct one, it will feed back. It is tunneled here, and it will feed back into itself. So, right, but it will not bypass these. It will not pass by these filters again because they are already pre-approved, right? So let's connect the signal again, and let's see how it works. It's going to take some time. Okay, we get our first left half. It will move here. It will get rejected by these filters. It will move on to the next section. It will get rejected by all of those filters as well. But here, it will get approved, and they will move into this whirlpool, and they will stay there. All right? So now it's kind of like a lottery going on, right? Where your chances of winning, in parentheses, is 1 in 8. Right, and otherwise you will just have to. The shapes will just get rejected, be fed back into the system, and try again, so to speak. Okay, so as soon as we get, I also have an overflow mechanism in place, actually, so that in case we do get wrongly stacked shapes, faux shapes, let's call them faux shapes. They will get rejected by all the filters, and they will feed back into the warehouse, actually, which if I don't forget, we can have a look at as well later on. So this mechanism now is accepting shapes, right? And it's going to try and create these pairs. And as soon as we have a pair of shapes running in loops, then that will be released again, just as with the initial system, and it will be fed back. There we go. We have a release. They will move down. And what these block sections also do is they line up the batches of shapes again, because of the imprecision with these storages and the belt readers. Actually, these shapes get dispersed over time. Even though they move in a single column, in a single file, they will get dispersed if they move through storages and filters and other units and whatnot. So these block sections, they also serve a purpose of rounding up that particular batch of shapes again. Here you see it happen, right? So the shapes, they're not together anymore, and this will round them up and let them pass in as one batch into the shape, into the stacker. And this is going to ensure that batches stay together, right? And if we have an excess, then this excess is just fed back into this whirlpool, where they will usually get rejected if they are one of the shapes that comes from here, or get accepted into the system again if it's another shape. Okay, so now we see that we have we just had a full layer, so we're at the next level already, right? Here is the full layer. And the full layers, they will move into this next system, right? Same lottery system, but now the chances are 1 in 4, and in this system the chances are 1 in 2, so they will be the quickest. All right, but you see these shapes, they have a 1 in 4 chance, so they just need to keep on cycling for a while sometimes until they get accepted by the correct filter. Now, there we go. Okay, now we have a next shape. Let's follow it. It will move all the way down. All the way down here. Move through the block sections. There we go. And I'm actually going to cut this so that you see how the block section works again. So if I have shapes queuing here, then these shapes will remain queuing there, and they will remain queuing there, and the next batch will remain queuing here, etc. Right? So let's fire that up again, and as soon as this is vacated, then the next batch will be allowed to pass. Right? That is how the block section works. Okay, so let's get back to this batch, and this little train. And now we get one batch of a double stacked shape, okay? And it will come out the other end, and it will take its place in line queue in this particular storage. Now, with the filters, there is a priority mechanism in place, okay? So, as I said before, if this filter and storage combo, if this contains any shapes, then all of these filters will be blocked. And what that means in practice is that if we have any, let's call it an advanced or partially done shape coming from the top, then these will have to yield, right? These initial shapes will have to yield. And I do that, obviously, because a shape that is partially done should have to take priority over shapes that are just the raw quadrants, right? So this means that these shapes will only be allowed to be released if we have nothing coming from the top anymore, and this will, and this is going to take a while, right? But as long as that's the case, these shapes will patiently have to wait their turn. Well, and the thing is, this will eventually work, because if there is no input coming from these anymore, then sooner or later there will be nothing left for this to output, right? So we won't get an output here, and the system will remain free, and then these shapes can feed the system again. You know, that's how it works. Now, the other problem I had is there are a lot of, let's say, the priority directions, right? So if we have shapes coming from the left, then shapes at the top will have to queue. But there is another priority direction from left to right in place, which is if this storage releases a batch of shapes, then all the other storages will have to wait. And another problem that I ran into is that eventually I would not get this combination of shapes stacked, because I kept on receiving shapes from the storage, and then since this would also would always take priority, I ran into an issue where the end of the line would never get a turn. Right, and we would get an endless production of these shapes, and they would queue endlessly in their appointed storage, right? But we would never ever get the other shape. So what I did was I made a blocking system that works the other way around as well. And what that does is as long as we have shapes in the rightmost storages, and that's triggered by this belt reader right here. So as long as this belt reader is receiving a 1 signal because it has shapes moving through it, then all of the storages that lie left of that, all the columns left of that, they won't output any shapes anymore. So in the beginning, we release shapes in all columns at once, and then the machines will gradually work their way from right to left. But no new shapes will be fed into this system as long as these belts are not empty. Only if these storages are empty, then new batches will get released. That's the way that works. And again, this is the wiring that comes with that, so it's incredibly complex. But what it basically does is, it's just a bunch of OR gates connected to each other, and if any one of them is a 1, then just these filters will not receive their appropriate signal. The signal will get shut off, whether it be here or whether it be at the top right here. Okay, so that is basically the way that works. Now, out of curiosity, I want to see how we're going with this. And I don't think we have already produced a batch of final. Oh, yes, we have. Yes, we have. Right, so at the end of the entire machine, I have a buffering system, and this machine is actually capable of leveling up, but I need a buffer for that because the throughput is obviously slower than 4 items per second. So I use the buffering system. If you don't know how it works, I invite you to go watch my previous video because I explain how a buffering system works in that video, and frankly, I'm a bit too lazy to explain it again. Okay, but let's get back to that. So we have successfully produced a batch of shapes. Now here we have an example of my machine going slightly out of sync, but it will restore over time. So we will get some erroneous shapes sooner or later, right? This is, as far as I have found, unavoidable. I have not found a way of avoiding this, and frankly, I don't think you can. You cannot force 2 belts to contain exactly the same amount of shapes. And that is because the signals, the wiring layer, the signals on the wiring layer, they are not instant either. They might take a fraction of a second sometimes to get the signal moving to the correct place, and that might mean that, for example, let's take these 2 filters as an example, that this filter might allow 1 shape more or less to pass compared to this filter or something like that, right? So it is very hard, and I think I can say it is impossible to line that up perfectly because there is a fraction of a second of a delay on the wiring layer as well. So I think it's impossible. Now, the next thing, if you have paid attention to this thing, recycle wave 1 and 2, is I have a bunch of recycling mechanisms in place. And now that I think about it, first I want to talk about something else. And that is this machine right here. Right? What happens if we have missing quadrants on our shape, on our layer? And I'm going to try and use an extreme case of that. So let me conjure up a shape. Just a second. Sorry about that. All right, let's take this shape, for example, right? It doesn't have all quadrants on it. So what happens? If we don't have all quadrants, then we are not going to need any of these storages at all, right? So what happens instead is these upper filters right here, they are going to detect, no, it's not these ones, sorry, it's these ones. These are going to detect whether we need shapes on both sides of the aisle, and if we don't, then they're both going to be set to 0, and they're going to move into this system, which is another block section system, which is going to try and ensure that we don't get a holy mess, that we don't clog this whirlpool system too much. Because if we put too many shapes into this system, then eventually it will get stuck. So I needed another system, another kind of block section system where these shapes are just going to patiently wait their turn. And if this system, if this rotation whirlpool system gets too jammed, gets too clogged up, then this filter will shut off, and it will keep these shapes in place. And that's basically what that does. So the way that is connected, in case you're curious, is here. So if any of these storages is full or is not empty, let's say it's not empty, then this shape, then this will produce a 1, and that will ultimately feed back into this particular filter. Now, how all of the wiring and the virtual stacking works, I'm not going to explain that because I already explained that in detail in my previous video, right? But essentially what it does is all of the signals get stacked virtually as well, so that these filters can get the correct signal, which is the stacked or the partially stacked shape as well. And I'm going to simply assume that you know about virtual stacking on the wiring layer. And if you don't, then I invite you to watch a different video where that is explained. I, for one, have done one of those. So, all right. Now the next thing I wanted to talk about is these recycle waves, recycle wave 1 and 2. The problem with this machine is that it requests a lot more shapes than my single color mixing unit right here can produce. So what I did was a massive recycling program so that as few shapes as possible would get discarded or thrown into the trash. And I'm going to try and recover as many of those shapes as I can. Okay, so any shape that either comes out here because it is rejected by all filters, and that's going to be the case if we change a shape, then suddenly all the shapes running across these belts, they will get rejected, and they will run across this belt. But also, in case this system does get clogged, I have an overflow mechanism here, and it will output the shapes right here. So, among others that, but also if we get a new shape, all the filters will just release everything. To put it bluntly, like you have massive diarrhea or something, everything will be released at once, and all these shapes will feed into this recycling center. So basically what this is going to do is, again, it receives the signals of the same signal as this hub right here does, this storage right here does, and it's just going to try and, recover as many shapes as possible. So first, it's going to try all the rotations for the gray windmill quadrant or the trapezoid quadrant. If that doesn't work, then try the next one, try the next one, try the next one. And it's going to try that 32 times in a row. Okay, it's going to go all the way to the top. That's recycle wave number 1. And then I have another system in place where these filters are also going to reject the shape, even if they are a match. Then if the storage is already full, it's going to also reject that particular shape. That's recycle wave 1 right here. Now then that will move down to recycle wave number 2. And recycle wave number 2 feeds back all the way to the cutter. So for example, let me see if I can. Oh shit! I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Let me try and look at the. Okay, so let's take this shape for example, right? This particular one right here. It contains a blue square, 2 gray circles, and a white circle. So it would make sense for me to feed that shape back into the cutter, because that way I can recover 4 shapes that I will not be needing to produce, right? So that way I'm going to try and recover as many shapes as I can. And remember in the beginning I said that as long as we have shapes moving across this belt reader, then this will be shut off, and all of the colors, they will just patiently wait their turn in the storage right here until this entire queue is processed. And I think I didn't mention it, so the shapes that are coming out here from the cutter, they will just pass by all the potential storages, and in case we get full storages or we get shapes that don't match, for example, because they are partially stacked or whatever, and they come from the recycle wave, then at the end of all of that, then it will get trashed. And I notice now that this particular belt does not do anything, then it will get trashed. And we will see that actually, over the course of production of all of these shapes, I am actually not bleeding too many of these shapes. So this machine has been running for quite some time with this particular shape that I had put in. And for example, we've only lost 200 red circle units, right? We have only lost 100 yellow circles. We have only lost 300 green circles, etc. So these machines, these storages, they do not bleed dry as fast as you would think they might, right? Because of this recycling mechanism. And I think all in all, I have explained everything. No, not yet. Not yet. Let's get back to the color mixer, because this bit is quite complex. There is a part I have not explained yet, and that is what this particular array of wires is doing. And I hope you remember the rotational mechanism that I talked about in the beginning. So what is this mechanism going to do? Let's say I'm taking a shape that has only one color, okay? Let's say, I should have one right here, actually. Let's say I take the Omni Red shape right here. This has only red on it, right? No other color. Now, I wanted to make sure that my color mixer would start producing only red, because if red is the only thing we use, then it would not make sense for this machine to output any other color than red, right? So how did I do this? And this was a really complex part. And again, I am deeply sorry if I don't manage to explain properly how it works. But we have a red signal at the moment, right? And this signal moves up into this system. And what this system is going to do, it is connected with these wires right here. And these wires are connected to the storages. Okay? So if we have, we can look at yellow. Okay, if all of the storages that pertain to one particular color, if they are all full, then we get a wire running here that is connected with an AND gate. It will run here, it will run here, and it will run here. Then we will get a 1 signal right here, and that will be transformed into a yellow signal. So that means if all of the yellow storages are full, then at the top we will produce a yellow signal. And if any of these storages are empty or not completely full to the brim, which is the case in red, then we don't get a signal, right? Because we now fired up a red shape, a shape that only contains red dye. All other storages will remain full, and it's only red that is going to slowly deplete. Okay, so back to this initial machine. What does this do? So we have signals, color signals on all the wires except the last one. All right, keep that in mind because we're only using red. Now what this machine is going to do is it's going to take the incoming signal, the one that comes from the belt reader, and it's going to transform the signal that is input into the signal that we need. Okay? So in this case, red is our incoming signal because we have red moving across our belts. Okay? Now, suppose that we don't have a red signal either, right? Sorry, a yellow signal either, and I can simulate that by cutting this wire. Okay. Then if we have red coming across our belts, then the next color in line is yellow, right? And this signal is transformed into yellow. However, if now our signal is yellow and the system finds a match here because our yellow storage is full, then that will be bypassed. No, I forgot where I cut the line here. That signal will be bypassed, and it will eventually turn back into white. And if you remember, the white signal triggers the red storages to open, right? So this is an extremely convoluted and confusing setup, and I nearly lost my mind producing this. Because as far as gray is concerned, gray doesn't require any paint. So if we do get gray, then we get a gray signal right here, and then that gray signal that would turn into a 1. That signal moves down into another combination of logic gates that will eventually trigger this filter to shut, so that in the closed position, that means that it will actually release a bunch of these, etc., etc., etc. So this system is going to try and determine, do we even need the next color, or the color that's next in line, compared to the one that's currently running across the belts, right? That is the mechanism. Okay, and then the output of that is feeding into the same mechanism again, because otherwise I noticed that at the end of the line, because we also need gray, this was a really tricky bit. Because we also need gray, then eventually the signal would be gray, and it would remain gray, right? And it would stay gray until all of the gray storages were full. So I needed to let that rotate, right? So if the signal is gray, and that's what this bit does, then Then we're going to continue a white signal again, and the white signal is going to do the same thing. So the white signal is compared to the storage of the red state, and if the red storage is empty, then the white signal is allowed to continue, because if you recall, the white signal triggers the red color, right? This rotational mechanism is really tough to... It was really tough for me to wrap my head around, right? So let's now suppose that my red is full. Then, you know, the signal will be blocked. So I didn't talk about that before. I have a bunch of transistors here, and in a lot of different cases, it is going to, you know, just block the signal so that none of these storages actually releases any color. So, and I have a ton of those. The first one is if this belt reader is picking up a signal because it has color moving across it, then it's going to shut the signal off. Let's see, what is the other one? If this storage is full, then that is another condition where it's going to block the signal. If all of the storages are full, right, that is what this line does. And then finally, if we have movement on any of these two belt readers, which means that the color mixer is processing, then that is also a condition where the signal will be blocked, and in that case, all of the storages will actually remain closed. So that is what that does. Let's get this back so that our machine can industriously start recovering these red shapes again. Okay, because we're still producing that red shape. Let's see where we've gotten. Yeah, this is doing its thing nicely. Now I feel like I have rambled on for ages and ages and ages and ages, but then again, this machine, I feel like this is the most convoluted and complex machine I have ever built. So I hope I explained everything sufficiently clear, and that on one hand it was sufficiently transparent without being too boring. I know I have rambled on for a long time about a lot of stuff, so what I think I'm going to do now, just for funsies, is I'm going to run the test to see how long it takes to get this shape produced. And just to figure out how long it took. So my previous machine, actually the lightweight machine that I made, it's still here. I made it in the same map. That took me about 20 minutes, I believe 21 minutes if I'm not mistaken, to get that shape produced. And just because I'm interested, I'm going to try and compare. All right, so see you in a small minute. So we're back, ready to get started on the timed bit. This was the shape that I was producing when I saved my game last. But not to worry, we're still in the same factory. Now, before we get the timer running, I wanted to talk about something else that I noticed I had forgotten to quickly mention. In case you were wondering what this bit is. Whenever we get a new shape, I noticed that whenever I changed the signal, this would slightly trip the color bit. For some reason, the signal, and I see that it has actually happened. This machine will go slowly out of sync, right? Over time, it will accumulate, let's say, one piece of color more on this line than the other one. And unlike with the stacking module, where I found a way to counteract this, actually my color mixer does not have such a system. So I think if we let this run for, let's say, days, then eventually it would get out of sync, right? And it would probably stop working altogether because it wouldn't be able to produce the correct color anymore, except for by accident almost, right? So it would slow down tremendously because these two lines would get out of sync. So since this is not a machine that I'm going to test for speed, I politely ask you to ignore this given. All right. Anyway, I wanted to get back to this thing in the beginning. So what I did is, as soon as we get a new shape, right, then this simple square shape here will start moving across the belt, and it will actually cut the signal altogether until it hits this belt reader right here. That's the way it works. So as long as as the shapes are traveling between this storage unit and this belt reader right here, then the main signal, this signal, it will get cut off. And what that is going to do is it is going to allow my entire purging and recycling system to spring into action. So what happens with the recycling system is if we don't get a proper signal, then all of these storages will release their content, right? And they will take some time to hit this belt reader, and this belt reader in turn is connected to the warehouse of my machine, right? So what this does is as long as this belt reader is receiving a signal of some sort, because it has shapes moving across the belt, then it will actually cut the signal of the warehouse, and none of the shapes will get released. And the thing is that this mechanism at the beginning here, this line is long enough so that the first shapes of my let's say the purging mechanism can reach that transistor, so that the signal is cut and none of the shapes are released, and this will allow some time for the machine to flush itself, to clean itself, and as soon as the other shapes right here in the recycle wave, like as soon as they hit this belt reader, right, by that time this takes charge. Let's say it takes the responsibility, and it doesn't really matter if the signal is cut here anymore, because we now have a different place where that happens. So that I wanted to quickly gloss over that in case you were curious what this particular thing does. It's not there to because it looks pretty. It actually has a function. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the signal. There we go. And we actually see that this is released. We have no signal moving, and as soon as this belt reader is hit, the signal, why is that a zero signal? Oh, right, because I cut the line. Right. Anyway, but it would, at least we have a signal, right? So as soon as this belt reader is hit with shapes, then this signal will be allowed to continue. And as soon as we get the first correct requested shape, then this final loop here, it will clear itself again. Just in case you were curious. So this is my purge button right here. So what I can now do is I can connect the wire, and then I can unpurge this, and we can watch the machine. Here we go. Okay, here we are again. Well, this is disappointing a bit because, well, it appears that the buffer queue was not long enough for the hub to register the throughput of 40 items per second, but I'm still going to count that as a win, and I'm gonna keep this result. Let's say 26 minutes as the result of this timed run. So that means that this machine is in fact even slower than my previous one was. However, for some reason I find it so much more satisfying to watch. I feel like the lightweight machine, which I still have it here. It felt like this was more kind of a haphazard thing, and it was super slow to proceed and produce a shape. Whereas this one, I feel like, I don't know, I just like watching it because it's constantly doing something. It's constantly active, and with the shapes zooming across the belts and the block sections where the shapes patiently await their turn. There is something about this machine that I really like. So, I hope you enjoyed this little challenge, and I'm not sure yet whether there'll be a next challenge. If so, what it will be. Feel free to leave suggestions in the comments if you like. And, I think I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed this machine. And, maybe it gives you some inspiration to start working with your own designs. Feel free to share with me whatever you've conjured up. I'm always interested to see what other players get out of this game that I have grown to love so much. And, well, as I said, we're gonna wrap it up here. I wish you all a lovely day. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.